Hey everybody, thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at Yamada Murasaki's Talk to My Back. This is a Ryan Holmberg translation from Drawn and Quarterly. It came out a while ago. I had read it and set it aside because I kind of wanted to talk to my mom about it because it's very much about motherhood, but she's got busy and I thought maybe I'd talk to Tori, but she's not feeling well. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a recording of it because it's a really good book, and I wish we would have put it out, the review out right when it came out, because all of the stuff that Ryan chooses to translate is awesome, and this is no exception. This is a work by a female artist in Japan working in more like underground comics, like slice of life comics, autobiography type of comics. The stuff in this book was made from 1981 to 84, and it kind of reminds me of like a more like cynical family circus. It's like a young mother learning to be a mother, but obviously in this book the author is much less impressed with marriage than than the characters in For Better or For Worse are. And it's a bunch of short stories that just deal with a young mother with a kind of negligent husband, and just takes like a feminist look at I don't know, it's not terribly politicized, but it's definitely, looking at the struggles of a young mother in Japan in the 80s. And it's really well done. There's just all of these kind of, it's not overly, there's not a lot of captions and stuff. You can read between the lines to get the message, which I think is a big deal when you're dealing with politicized topics. It seems like the more in between the lines you allow, the better. And so I think this book is really good for that. Here you just have her like dealing with the fact that her husband's saying, I still got work to do, I'm going to stay the night. He's probably like cheating on her or something. And she's sitting here kind of arguing with her imaginary husband who's not there. There's a lot of like little observations about the world in here. I think that's mostly, what I want to talk about is these things that stood out to me as keen little observations of the world. Here she says, for 6 years now, I've never walked at a pace that was mine. And she's talking about she's always walking at a child's pace. And that's something that, I'm Jack's stepdad, but I never had a kid of my own, so I kind of like inherited a kid at 10 rather than 3. But also, with Tori having the problems she's having with long COVID, she has to walk quite slow now, and it's very hard for me to, it's almost like takes more energy for me to walk super slow. And so that kind of was like, I never thought about that. When you've got a kid, they can't go as far, and someone over time, like if you're always forced to walk at that pace, like I go to work and I can walk at my own pace, but if your whole life is bound by someone else, then you're going to learn to walk at their pace, and it would feel strange. You can also see here there's just some really beautiful, like loose, scratchy, almost Bill Sienkiewicz type of inking going on. Not always, it's sometimes a little bit more controlled, but then there's like a crayon or something on top of that. So you can see just some of the real beauty in the artwork as well, even though the compositions are often sparse and understated. That works really well. Here's another example of just some really great cartooning. This is something that the artist Bastien Vivez does a lot, and this reminds me, even though she's obviously working a lot earlier, I wonder if he'd seen some of her work or something, because the loss of the one eye and the sparseness of the line and everything reminds me a lot of his work. And there's just a beauty and sensitivity to be able to pull off something like that, where you're missing information, but it all makes sense anyways. Right here, she's talking about the need for free time. She wanted her free time, and that she wanted it so bad sometimes that it made me resent her kids, and it made her resent her kids, not me. But that's something also that, like, when Jack's around, it's hard for me because I'm used to having a fair amount of free time to myself. And that was one of the things that always scared me about having a kid, is that I, as an artist and just as a kind of introvert who likes to hole off in my room and draw, I like my free time. And so that was always scared me about kids. And it's nice to see, even someone who's like committed to being a parent is having that struggle as well. And I'm sure as an artist that is something that she struggled with. Here she says, I thought I'd done growing up once I became an adult, but I guess it's time to grow up again. And that's, again, something that I think has been very relevant to my own life recently, and is a just really well-observed moment about humanity, is that you hit these landmarks of like, I got a full-time job, I became a parent, or, whatever, anything like that. And then kind of life always can throw you one more thing. You're never done in that process. And that's painful sometimes, but also, it's good. You can feel the growth and you feel like you're moving. And she's grappling with that in this book, trapped in this situation at home, but also feeling her own growth. This one here is just a really funny, like, little prank. I don't even know if it's a prank the kids are playing on her, but it's pretty funny. The kid is she's talking about this new heated table that she got. That's what this whole story is about, is this nice heated table that she set up. And then the kids are telling her that it stinks under there, and she's worried that the heating unit has shorted out. So she goes to check underneath it and gets a whiff of it, obviously. And then he says, "Nope, I farted." And then here she says, "They got me." So yeah, they were playing on a prank on her. And then she said, "It made me happy." And that's the kind of thing that, as I experience it as a teacher, and I experience it as as a stepdad or whatever, is there's definitely times where kids are really, really clever. I've had students do things that absolutely, as a substitute teacher especially, I had instances where students did things that were a total pain in the ass to my job, but also like clever and funny, and so you want to give them credit for that. And that constant struggle, parents have that all the time. We have that with the dogs too. You gotta scold the dogs, but really what they're doing is funny. So having them play a gross prank like this, I just, it's that kind of down to earth thing that probably obviously happened to her, or something close. I don't think you can really just write moments like that, and I find those things more powerful. They're so particular that they become universal. Here's where she really goes in on kind of her emotional grappling with the situation. What's lonely is not that their husbands don't recognize and respect them, but that they're trapped inside this flesh called the family, which exists simply so the man has a woman to protect his ego. And there you can see where she's kind of really pushing against the social mores of husband and wife and all of that stuff, that she's feeling really, really trapped by it. And to call it the flesh called family, I think is pretty intense. And again, an example of, I think, Holmberg, I can't read Japanese, but you always get the sense that when he's translating, he's doing his best to really capture kind of the full poetic force of how the author writes, whether it be a literal translation or not, I don't know, but the intensity of the writing always comes through in Holmberg's stuff. And he tends to look for writers who have bits of writing like that, where they really kind of punch you in the gut. And I find that to be really, really valuable. Here's another moment that just has some really nice like writing in it, but also just storytelling wise and plot wise, just really intense. She says that my husband would go so far as to travel to another country to buy sex is profoundly humiliating. You need to do something about this. So you get, again, the sense of the type of situation she's in and what she's facing, that her husband will fake these business travels to other countries just to go be with prostitutes and get away from her, and how emotionally devastating that must be. And then that she's like being emotionally honest and raw enough to record that and put that out in the world is really intense. So any kind of work that has, I know it's painful and it's hard to read stuff like that sometimes, but that kind of emotional intensity always is going to grab me with a book. This is maybe one of my favorite things about having Jack around, is figuring out how to trick him into helping me do work, or how to teach him things, because he's always like, if he thinks you're trying to get him to do something, he's not going to do it. And I think that's pretty common amongst kids. Something that I've learned as a teacher too, although it's less of a thing. But here, she's like, "Hey, can you help me for a minute?" And she's like, "Doing what now?" And then she says, "See how the carrot is? I want you to shave the edges off like this with a knife. It's called beveling. Looks neat, huh?" And then she's like, "Totally, let me do it." And so she's figured out, and she says here, my kids like trying different things. They also like helping their mom. However, they don't like to be forced to do anything. And so then she sees that this other kid is like, the other kid comes in and sees his sister is doing something, because she figured this one, is a little bit easier to get involved. And then this kid is just jealous that the other sibling gets to be doing something. And it's like, "Oh, well, I'll find something for you to do too. Come over, help with the onions." And just that kind of like psychology you have to get into being a teacher, being a parent. I think that's recorded really well in here. And then here at the end, there's again another just really well written kind of punch in the gut type of conversation, that is again about her relationship with her husband. He's being honest with her. He's saying that he's scared of her becoming independent, what if you don't need me anymore? And I think that's an unhealthy thing that relationships get into, is that one person is kind of he's the moneymaker, and so she needs him in that way, and he has to maintain that position of authority, or else she might leave him. And that's definitely just something about the way our world's structured. But she says, well, I feel like you threw me away a long time ago. We created this vessel called a family, and it's like you just dumped me in it and forgot me there. And that idea, that they crafted this thing, and then he just kind of dumped her into this vessel and walked away, and she already feels like he doesn't need her anymore, in a sense. Like he just needs her, like she needs him for the money, and he needs her to take care of the house, but there's not any real connection in between them anymore. Just all that kind of stuff is so well expressed and so well written in the book. And then the light, airy drawings, I think really let that writing come to the forefront. And it is so domestic. There's not, you're in the house, there's not a lot to show off. So I think in this sense, this airy art is really appropriate for the book. So those are just some of the moments I liked out of it, little things here and there. It's obviously a much richer book than that. That's just a little preview of it. But I wanted to make sure to get a review of this out there, because the Drawn Quarterly just announced that they're going to be releasing another Yamada Murasaki book translated by Ryan Holmberg, and I'm really looking forward to that one. So I definitely recommend that you all go out and get this if you haven't, and then prep yourself to get excited for the new work, because if it's as emotionally engaging as this one is, and kind of well observed and thoughtful, then it's going to be a hell of a book. If you enjoy what we're doing here on the channel and you want to support us, there are two ways to do that. The first is through our Patreon. We have two different tiers of engagement. At the first tier, you can get early access to our videos. At the second tier, you could get exclusive previews of the books that Sean and I are working on, or personal graphic novel projects, as well as the ability to vote in and participate, determine what happens in the story for our ongoing webcomic experiment, Prane Day. Any of the money that we make from the Patreon just goes back into helping buy the books that we review. So that's really helpful, because it helps us keep the channel going, but we also get to put that money into other creators, publishers' pockets and stuff. So try and turn it back in and keep supporting the community of the medium that we love. So that's really appreciated. If you want to support Living the Line itself, the best thing to do is get some of the books that Sean's putting out through Living the Line Publishing. So we'll go ahead and take a look at one of those now. Plaza by Yokoyama Yuichi. This is translated by Ryan Holmberg and is very large for a manga, so that's a really cool feature of this book, this standard manga size. And this is just a 200 some odd page representation of what Yokoyama Yuichi thinks of the Carnival Parade, and he's just made this like relentlessly loud and rhythmic book that pushes all kinds of amazing boundaries of what comics and manga are, and we could not recommend this book more.
Like and subscribe and hit the bell, please, so Carson can finish reading his books and let me go home.